Robin Odell. Thank you, recording in progress.
Mm.
I'm the curator of collections at the Florida Museum of Photographic Arts. And we're very happy to have all of you here today and to especially welcome Selena Roman, who curated this exhibit. And of course, Joanne McArthur, who's going to give a talk. Selena is going to introduce Joanne a little bit, but I just want everyone to know our wonderful curator, Selena, is an amazing photographer in her own right, as well as a professor, and she did a really wonderful job curating this exhibition. It is really captivating if you haven't been able to see it in person. The exhibition is called The Company We Keep, Photographs of Our Complex Relationships with Animals, and it will be up until July the 3rd of this year. So if you're anywhere near Tampa, Florida, we would love for you to come by and see it. So take it away, Selena.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I wanted to first off thank Robin Odell and Zora for the opportunity to curate this exhibition. It's been such a highlight of my year, excuse me, working with these two fabulous artists and photographers, Jayanti Seiler and of course Joanne McArthur, who's with us today. And I just wanted to say that in curating the show, we're treating it as sort of two separate exhibitions under an umbrella exhibition regarding our relationships with animals, but it was really enjoyable and profound to look at these two very different approaches, but also find so many interesting parallels between the work, whether it be formal, parallels. I noticed like a lot of the color red and green, these complementary colors, but then also some thematic things and just the way that people interact with these animals, whether it be loving, whether it be, just more like a job, but just very interesting altogether. And so I really encourage anyone who hasn't seen it yet to get into the museum before mid-July to see it, because it's just really a wonderful, thoughtful show from these two artists. So I wanted to introduce Joanne McArthur. She's coming to us from Canada, right, Joanne? And so she's an award-winning photojournalist based in Canada. She's traveled the world documenting animal trade from breeding to transport, slaughter, and consumption. So all of the areas that animals touch our lives. In 2019, she founded We Animals Media. This is a photo agency that's dedicated to the documentation of animals. Her work has been published in 3 monographs. Additionally, her work and writing, her photography and writing have been in publications such as National Geographic and National Geographic Traveler, The Washington Post, The Guardian, Lens Culture, Medium, Vice, Canadian Geographic, Days Japan, Helsing Sanomat, Der Spiegel, Photo Life magazine, Huffington Post, Outdoor Photography, and Feature Shoot, among many others. Her recent awards include the 2021 Big Picture Grand Prize, 2021 AEFONA First Prize, and Man in Nature category, 2021 Wildlife Photographer of the Year, People's Choice finalist, 2020 Nature Photographer of the Year, Man in Nature category winner, and 2019 Wildlife Photography of the Year in the photojournalism category, among many others. I am honored to introduce to you Joanne McArthur and to turn it over to her. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you. I didn't know you were going to read all of this.
That's how we do it here.
I wanted to say but know. Anyway, it's part of the whole thing, I guess.
Well deserved.
Seriously. Thank you. Thank you for the warm introduction, all of you. Thank you for hosting this exhibit of animal work, political animal work at your museum. It's timely, it's relevant, it's engaging, it's necessary. And I'm really grateful to have your incredible place and platform to feature the work that Jayanti and I do. Selena, I have to say it was such a pleasure working with you on the selection of the images. My work's been exhibited a lot, and never had I had such a pleasure of working with a curator and talking about the work. And you understood the work, you understand the layers in it, you saw things that I didn't see, and you're gifted at really, bringing work to life and putting it all together. So honestly, what a pleasure to work with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, yes. So I think what I'll do is I'll start screen sharing and we'll go from there. From the beginning. How is that? Yes?
Looks good.
Thank you. What I'll be doing, a brief overview, is talking about animal photojournalism, sharing stories that I've shot over the last 20 years. I think I've been to over 60 countries now doing so. By the way, if I'm looking to the side of my screen, it's because I can see you all there, so I'm looking at your faces. And talking about solutions as well, which is one of the most exciting parts of my job and a really nice balance to the hard investigative work that I do. But here we are. Animals in the Anthropocene is the name of my most recent book. 40 contributors are involved in this tome of a book, and I'll tell you more about this later. So it's Hidden Animals in the Anthropocene, and the Anthropocene is the proposed name for the current geologic epoch. It means total human planetary domination. Animals cannot get away from us. Wild animals, certainly not domesticated animals. And this is where and how we are living now. And that is the title of most of my presentations now. It's Animals Trapped in Our Web and What We Can Do About It. Ron is one of these animals, one of the billions. And he's who you see here. And I'm really grateful that he's in your exhibit. People get to know his story, and it's an important one. I photographed him after his rescue. He's here at Save the Chips in Fort Pierce, Florida. And he's already been rescued from a life of research. I got to see his files and piece together a little bit about what his life was like. But later on, I realized that he and I were born just 2 months apart. And, we were the same age when I met him. And I started to think about the chronology of our lives. And was, from what I could piece together, he lived most of his life in a 5 by 5 by 7 foot cage suspended above the ground, like the way we would put a canary in a cage, which is also wrong. But that's how he lived. And I thought about, well, when I was 8 years old and he was 8 years old, I was out climbing trees and playing, and he should have been doing that too, but he had already spent years of his life in this cage. And then when Ron and I were 18, I went off to study, but he was being studied still in this cage at the Colston Foundation. And his charts are sketchy, but we do know that in one period of his life, he was anesthetized like over 100 times in a year. We know that he was part of a spinal dynamics study in which a disc in his neck was removed, and that he wasn't given pain medication for 8 days after that surgery. And then when Ron and I were 26, mercifully, he was rescued and he was saved by Save the Chimps. That's where I took this photo. He was one of the lucky few. He was scarred for life, physically, psychologically, but he was still a really nice guy. And this is what stands out about him, is that though we had treated him so poorly for so long, he was the welcoming committee at Save the Chimps. He was the chimpanzee that new chimpanzees would meet first. However they did that, I'm not quite sure, but he was sort of the meet and greet, hello, this is a safe place. And he did that for humans as well. I saw him doing that with the baby chimpanzees that were brought into the sanctuary. And though Ron had 5 acres to hang out on that particular island with his friends, he chose to stay indoors where he felt safest. And he would stay in that nest of blankets, which is where you see him, which is where I took this picture. Every morning he would form that nest of blankets because that's where he felt safest. And that's also where he died, in that nest, peacefully but prematurely, which is a common fate for animals used in research. And I'm just, grateful that he's part of your exhibit and that people can put a face to the individuals we use. We often think of them as, numbers, if we think of them at all, but they have, a face and a personality, and they are sentient. Someone else you've included in your exhibit is Kiska, who you see here. This is an example of how animals are in plain view, and yet they do remain hidden. So what do I mean by that? When we go to a place of animal use and entertainment, we're there for our pleasure, our enjoyment, our experience. And though the animals are right in front of us, we're not really considering them, how they feel about being there, how they got there. And so sometimes I take a picture that's just like the picture people are taking who are standing right next to me. This is one of those cases. I did spend a long time there though, and I include this image because people are pointing at her, and it further makes my point about how we objectify animals. It's interesting how we would never point at humans. It's considered rude, but we have no problems pointing at other individual non-human animals like Kiska. And a little bit about Kiska is that when you find out what she has gone through, it really changes the picture. Briefly, she was wild caught off the coast of Iceland in 1979, which is a long time ago, with other orcas who died. She was impregnated here at Marineland 5 times. She gave birth 5 times, and all of her babies died. And she essentially lives alone here in this tank in what is ironically called Friendship Cove. She lives alone in Friendship Cove. And there are a lot of efforts to get her out and into the first ever whale sanctuary, which is being built right now off the coast of Canada. On to a happier story. I do get to photograph stories of change and progress and love and compassion. And one of the things I like about photojournalism is that you don't have to get the image exactly right. Like this picture is out of focus, and yet I chose it to be the lead of this story because it sets the scene, it gives context. So what you're seeing here is a plane landing, and the plane is full of 3,000 hens who have been rescued. We don't know who the person is who donated this charter flight for 3,000 chickens, but we refer to this person lovingly as the henefactor. Yes, this was something that was totally paid, by a philanthropist in order to rescue these chickens. So a little bit of a backstory. Billions of hens are kept in conditions like these every year. There was a farmer on the west coast of the US, and he had a change of heart about farming hens, and he didn't want to keep captive and enslaved these birds, and he had 3,000 left. So he called sanctuaries and he said, do you have room to take my birds? And of course, 3,000 birds is a heck of a lot, but sanctuaries banded together. Some took 10, some took 100, some took 1,000, but 1,100 of those 3,000 birds were sent to the East Coast, which is where the plane comes in, the henefactor's charter plane. And this is also where I come in. These 1,100 birds are landing at the airport. I'm with a bunch of activists and NGOs who are there. And they're really nervous about how these birds did 5 hours in a plane. And so they start unloading the birds, and now we have 10 in a cage. So we've gone from 3,000 to 1,100 to 10 per cage. And if you can see the bottom right, people, their faces are just so excited to get their hands on these birds and let them free. And so this is the first time these birds have ever touched down on grass. This is at Farm Sanctuary. The birds had all sorts of issues, including dehydration. So here, one of them is being given subcutaneous fluids. Their nails looked like this because they've been standing on cage flooring their entire lives, and they all had mites, and so they were given a dust bath. And here we are, one of the 10 of the 1,100 of the 3,000, which is really one of the billions. Her name is Jolene. You can see that she's been debeaked. Debeaking is a practice that happens worldwide. It says admit someone. I guess someone else is doing that. But yes, billions of birds go through debeaking. You can see that's what's happened here. They debeak birds so that they don't peck each other to death in confinement. But here is Jolene, one of the billions, and this is part of my job, is to give a face, show the face, let us connect, let us make eye contact with the billions of animals we use and we eat every single year. Because, we don't register numbers like billions of animals, and it's the same with humanitarian efforts. When we say, X number of thousands or millions of people are suffering, we don't really feel that, but we feel it when we see images of the individuals caught in these catastrophes. So what is this all about that I'm doing, and what is animal photojournalism? APJ for short is a genre of photography that We Animals Media coined, and we saw a necessity for that because what we've seen in the history of photography when it comes to animals, we see in typical wildlife photography, which are portraits and sort of beauty shots or action shots of wild animals. And then we saw a movement towards conservation photography. And that is photography that is more about helping, illuminating the plight of animals, helping animals, but it was exclusive. It's exclusive still to wild animals. And of course we have pet photography, we have all sorts of like street photography and other kinds of photography, but not one that included all animals. And all animals deserve to be included, and their stories need to be told because they're sentient. Just by virtue of who they are, their stories need to be told so that we can be thinking about them too, not just the wild animals. Animal photojournalism is timely because it ties into the eco-catastrophes unfolding, factory farming affects climate change, and deforestation is happening, pollution is happening also because of industrial farming. So all of these things tied together and form a part of the stories of animal photojournalism. I'll give you a few examples. Here we are, a team of investigators looking into hen farming. And here's the picture that we are taking there. These are some of the hens. Sometimes I go to a place and it's a property that has 1 million birds, that has 1 million individuals. It's really hard to get our heads around. I'm generally not welcome at places like this. Factory farms are not places where one is invited with a camera because there's a lot of death. There's a lot of sadness and confinement. And that's why there are also ag-gag laws now. Many of them are in the US, and I think they kind of started in the US. Ag-gags are laws that prohibit people like me to going onto a property. It prohibits people like me from even taking photos from public property, let alone being on private property. It prohibits whistleblowers. And this is all because of really strong lobbying to protect industries like this that are inherently cruel to animals. A few other quick examples. This is at a dairy farm. I photograph animals in transport, and I shouldn't say I, because it used to be just me with We Animals, and now we've become We Animals Media. And there are over 65 contributors to our NGO. So we photograph animals in transport, like you're seeing here, animals used for their wool, for their fur, for their skins. This is at a mink farm in Sweden. And again, back to the animals who are in plain view. This is in Florida at an Everglades park. And it's so interesting that we don't often think critically when it comes to other animals because we're being presented with, an event or a place, something that people have always done. Oh, we can go here and hold alligators and, eat them as well and buy their skins and go, out into boats into their territory. And this is billed as fun, but why is it fun? I would ask. when it's at the expense of others, and the others are these alligators. If you can see on the right, this alligator's face is taped up so that they can't bite. And when the animal is not being manhandled, rather, they're put back in this black box on the floor. Another example of animals in plain view who should not be there. This animal is likely drugged so that they don't attack the children. This is by one of our amazing hidden contributors, Gum India. Animals in plain view, again, it's so incredible that extreme violence can be perpetuated against them, and that we see it as something cultural and a cause for celebration, as we do at bullfighting. And here as well, this is in Texas. This is also considered a cultural event. It's a rattlesnake roundup where tens of thousands of snakes are killed every year. This is one of my winning images from Wildlife Photographer of the Year. And what you're seeing here are the handprints of children who have skinned the decapitated snakes themselves. And they get to write their name next to their bloody hands. It's so interesting how we teach children that the objectification, and in fact, in this case, extreme violence towards animals, is not only acceptable, but something to be celebrated. For me and the Zoom, there we are, okay. You all were sort of covering half the picture, so I've now moved you. I've moved you to the left. It's much better, because in this image, I want to point out specifically, here is Luke after he has performed, and there are 3 women holding babies on the far right. And it's so interesting that we're literally ignoring the elephant in the room. When we look at animals, especially in entertainment, it's such a superficial thing. We might see them performing for a few moments, but what is their life like when they're not performing? It's like this: they're chained up, they're being transported, they're lonely, they're totally out of their natural element, and we're not paying attention. Also, what we do in animal photojournalism is photograph the animals who are caught in the climate crisis. This is another of my award-winning images. She was one of the survivors of the cataclysmic fires in Australia. And this is flooding in North Carolina. I was there a few years ago to document the effects of the floods on the factory farmed animals. And something horrifying about that is that the animals are written off as inventory. The language we continue to evolve into using that separate them from their sentience and separate us, I guess, more appropriately from their sentience is really incredible, to the point where we're calling animals inventory. And so something that I read was that over 5 million inventory were lost in these floods. And animals in zoonotic diseases. There was an outbreak of a virus at this farm in South Korea. And so this is how the animals were disposed of. They were dropped into holes in the ground and then covered and buried. Selena was asking me what I'm up to these days, and this is part of what I'm doing. Speaking of zoonotic diseases, we have been in a pandemic for 2 years because of animal use, and it's so interesting that the focus has been on vaccines and all sorts of things, but not the prevention of not using animals. It's astounding. So this continues, and right now what we're seeing is the virus H5N1. To date, here in North America, over 35 million animals have been killed. They've been gassed because they have H5N1, or H5N1 has been found in the barns. And so this is what I'm shooting these days. This is a red-winged blackbird outside of one of those factory farms that has H5N1. Blurry in the background is the barn and people in hazmat suits. And I focused on the wild bird as well, because these diseases are being transmitted to wild animals as well. And we're seeing the effects of that. Widely reported in Israel is the death of thousands of cranes. These beautiful cranes are dropping dead as well because we are farming animals. we will get to some positive stories, I promise. We decided to put together this calling card for animal photojournalism and include the work of a lot of people. We photographers make books when, for me, I guess, when there's a subject matter that's important enough to memorialize and to literally make part of the history books. And so my co-editor and I, Keith Wilson, we called upon lots of photographers to submit their work, which we put in this tome of a book. It's 5 pounds. It was inspired by the photographer James Noctoy. He made a book called Inferno about how we treat others. And when I saw that book, I thought, I want to make I want to make a book that strong, but for animals someday. And so we've done that. And it is an award-winning book. And it is available on Amazon. And here are just a few images, and then we'll move on from some of this really tragic work that we're looking at here. Now, this is a photo of a lamb at a slaughterhouse by Britta Yashinsky. And this is by Timo Stamberger, and the image speaks for itself, which is why it's so incredibly strong. Some images are brought to life by the information behind them, like the story of Kiska, the story of Ron. This definitely stands on its own. We all know what this looks like, but this is a chicken farm. This image won in the photojournalism category at Wildlife Photographer of the Year last year. This is by Adam Oswald. And here we have an elephant performing at a zoo. And I find it so heartbreaking because this animal could not be farther from their natural habitat and what they should be doing. This image is absolutely stunning. And that's what I really like about the selections we made for this book, is that we took really, really hard subject matter and found the most beautiful and heartrending images, the ones that allow us to connect. I mean, these are horrific scenarios, but they're also beautiful images, which speaks to the power of photography, is taking these situations and making sure they have elements that allow the audience or encourage the audience to return to the image. This is fascinating. This is by Sabine Grutendorst. And why on earth they put these, pastoral images inside a factory farm, I have no idea. I don't know what humans would even care to see that, but you see the images, you see the actual living conditions of the pigs, and then you see this little beam of light coming through a tiny opening in the wall. Just a really incredibly strong image by her. Now, everywhere I go, I see people on the front lines doing amazing work on behalf of animals, and often these people were women. And I wondered if I was just imagining it because I'm a woman or because I'm a feminist. And I didn't want to be wrong about what I thought. And so we did some research, the team and I, and saw that in fact, there's Jayanti. Hello, Jayanti. So what we saw is that, in fact, data shows that of animal advocates globally, 60 to 80% of them are women and women identified. And I thought, wow, well, we need to celebrate this. And we need to celebrate this because there are still a lot of men in power positions in animal advocacy, and they are getting all the credit and they are the spokespeople. And yet it's mostly women who are around for the long haul doing a lot of the hard work. So this is the Unbound Project. We founded it in 2015. And we have stories about women from all over the world who are doing amazing work. People like Lumka Golintete, she's a first responder in South Africa. She's one of these people who gets up in the middle of the night, answers calls about emergency situations, and gets in her animal ambulance and goes. So we salute people like Lumka, the plant-based pioneers in the world. We know that vegan and veggie food did not always look like this. It's an absolute pleasure now to eat, whether you want junk food or really healthy stuff, it's all there. The project celebrates politicians like Marianne Thieme. She's the founder of the Dutch Party for Animals. And she has helped passed the import of trophy hunts to the country. They're working on a ban for fur farming, and their ultimate goal as a party is to end factory farming in their country. The project celebrates women entering the growing field of animal law. There are so many animal lawyers now. It's absolutely incredible. We celebrate people like Rabia Hawa. So she is the first female Muslim park ranger with the, did I get that right? First female Muslim ranger with the Kenyan Wildlife Services. And neurologists like Aisha Akhtar, who specialize in preventative medicine and public health. She's one of these people tackling zoonotic diseases and getting animals out of labs. We have all sorts of people here, sanctuary founders, veterinarians, there's the badass lawyers again, veterinarians, yes, I've said that, volunteers. And so we celebrate them and how they inspire us. This is Dr. Theodora Capaldo. She spent years as the president of the New England Anti-Vivisection Society. And I think it's very appropriate that I got to photograph her with a rescued rat, because as we know, rats are used by the millions every year in research. And she says this, it's all the same really. The environment, women, children, civil rights, it's all about the same thing, compassion and doing what's right for everyone. Oop. And so it's also great to be part of this animal advocacy movement, because I'm seeing so much change. You know, things are getting worse in some places, but they are getting better as well. We are learning slowly that, you know, animals are not necessarily ours for our whims and our entertainment. And so what I'm seeing as I travel the globe is that we're learning to avoid tourism that involves the use and abuse of animals. We're learning to eat our veggies. We know that we can be perfectly happy and healthy on a diet that is plant-based. Like Prince here, he ate this whole thing. He's not just posing with the celery, it's his favorite food. We're seeing humane education in schools. This is Sepoe Sitole. She's one of the Black Mambas in South Africa. And when they're not running or out in the field doing their anti-poaching patrol, they are teaching kids in schools to be better stewards of the earth and kinder to animals. We're speaking up to our political representatives. More and more parties worldwide are incorporating pro-animal initiatives into their policies. This is here in Toronto when hundreds of compassionate citizens came down to City Hall to help pass the ban on the import of shark fin products, which was successful. And it was really lovely to see so many people come out in shark outfits, which brought some levity to the day. More and more people are supporting sanctuaries, conservation and conservation efforts instead of zoos and aquaria. And so because of these efforts, these global efforts by so many incredible citizens and NGOs, I think that in my lifetime, we will see the closure of all unaccredited and roadside zoos. We will see an end to puppy mills. This was at a raid, a puppy mill raid and a rescue. 110 animals were removed from the property. And here, that image on the right, that puppy is getting their first bath from a really lovely volunteer. All of those animals were rehomed. We will see an end to trophy hunting. We will see a global ban on fur farming. This is something I'm particularly passionate about. What you're seeing here are empty cages. There used to be foxes in this cage, and because of the work that the team and I did investigating this place, that helped to eventually lead to criminal cruelty charges at the criminal. I'm getting my words all mixed up. There were cruelty charges which led to the closure of this farm here in Canada. We are seeing more and more countries ban the practice of fur farming, even the countries that were major fur producers like Norway. So we're seeing great movement on the phasing out of fur once and for all. And we're also seeing a lot of designers no longer using fur. I'm so grateful. We will see an end to the humiliation of animals in circuses. The image on the left is one that is in the exhibit, isn't it, Selena? This is at a despicable circus in France. And I'm so happy to say that France has now banned the use of wild animals in circuses, and we're seeing more and more of that. We will continue to see an end to captive breeding and keeping of cetaceans. And we will and are seeing an end to the larger primates used in medical research. And my hope is that the next stage is to get the use, to ban the use of animals in cosmetic testing. I'm just wrapping up my presentation now, but I do want to land on this image. This is Arthur. He's at Save the Chimps. He's also in the exhibit. And it reminds me of not too long ago when I met some chimpanzees who had been rescued from behavioral research. They had been taught to use sign language. And so it's incredibly rare to get to communicate in a common language with other animals. Of course, they have their own language, and so do we. We just, you know, we don't know their language, we don't listen to their language, and we don't try. And animals are phenomenal at communicating with us, but we just don't try hard to understand. Yet here we were with these chimpanzees. My friend and I were standing next to the sanctuary cage where he lives in this beautiful spot. And the chimpanzee looked at my friend who was holding a coffee cup and signed, "Is that coffee?" I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that we were getting to witness what an animal was thinking. I mean, the animal knew what coffee was and was asking us a question. And so we signed back through the interpreter, yes. And then the chimpanzee asked, "Can I have it with milk?" It was really, really something. Something else this chimpanzee did was kept pointing to my friend's face and making the sign for pain over and over. And it took us a while to figure out what the chimpanzee was saying or asking. And it's that my friend has these really big stretched earlobes with a big plug earring in it. And the chimpanzee thought, I guess that was unusual, and was asking my friend if it hurt. And I tell this story because I want us all to remember in all of our interactions with animals and with all the animals, whether there's an interaction or not, the animals of this world are so complex and thinking and inquisitive and quirky and opinionated. And I guess above all, they desire the same basic things that we desire, which is the freedom to live a happy and a healthy life with autonomy. We all want to be able to make our own choices and choose our own families and choose our own friends and where we go. And in all of the work that I do, we deprive them of all of that. And I'm really happy that you're exhibiting this work because it helps me share those stories and helps us see that animals do not deserve living in the systems that we've put them in, and that they are communicating with us, and that we should pay attention, because if we do, we will see that they're asking us to, treat them with respect and to leave them alone. This is a slide that shows our website. We have over 15,000 images that anyone can use for their campaigning, for their school projects, their academia, their social media. You can find a lot of work there. And so we encourage you to use those images. They're free. It's at weanimalsmedia.org. People often ask me, like, how do I do what you do? And how do I light in difficult situations? And how do I cope with these things? And so we created a masterclass, and that's on the website as well. It has 8 episodes, self-guided, about how to be an animal photojournalist. We have fellowships, we have volunteer opportunities. People can become a donor to We Animals Media, which is how we do the work that we do. And so that's where you can find that information. And this is where you can find our social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. It's all under the same name, We Animals Media. I'm very grateful that you've invited me to speak and you're exhibiting my work, and just thrilled for the opportunity, and so happy that the animal stories are getting out that much farther because of you.
Thank you, Joanne. That was such a fantastic talk, and I learned even more with those stories that you included. So thank you. I also
Thank
wanted to
you.
mention that the other exhibiting artist is here, the wonderful Gianti Seiler. Hi, Gianti. Thanks for joining. And if anyone has any questions, I think, Sarah, you're looking in the chat. If anyone or just would like to unmute themselves and ask a question, I think that's fine too. And while people are thinking of questions, I got an alert earlier on my phone today, Joanne, from the New York Times, that Ringling Circus is coming back, but without any animals. So I think that's pretty exciting, but they've been dormant since 2017.
There are so many victories happening, and we can all take part in ushering in these changes. It's a really exciting time to just take part in anything that you want to see changing. And we can do it by, I mean, I know people roll their eyes at signing petitions, but honestly, sign those petitions, get your name on things, up those numbers, support your MPs and politicians who are pro-animal animal welfare initiatives, and we can donate. I donate a couple dollars to a whole bunch of organizations every month because I'm able to do so, and so I do. Like this, we can get our hands dirty and all sorts of things. Whatever it is that you care most about, you can take part in.
Well, if people are still thinking of questions, I had a question for you, and maybe we might have talked about it in our, several conversations that we've had over the last several months, but what was that first story or that clincher or that, was the turning point for you that said, this is what I have to do, this is the direction I have to take, that moment, if you could share that with us?
I'm someone who always who always noticed how we used animals. I never really overlooked it. When we were kids, we would go to zoos, but I had noticed the sadness, the despondency, and but those feelings, certainly, I had no idea they would turn into a career. But then I fell in love with photojournalism, and I thought that, I want to travel and I want to see the hard things. I care about the hard things. So I'm going to go to Afghanistan. I'm going to go to where there are famines. And one of my mentors, Larry Towell, he's a photojournalist with Magnum. He said, "Joe, that's not you." It was actually really blunt and kind of seemed kind of rude. I was telling him about all these things I wanted to do. And he's like, "Joe, that's not you. Just do what you know, do what you love, and do what you know, and you'll do well at it that way." And that advice sunk in, because what I care about most in the world is helping animals, non-human animals and human animals. Okay, fine. But I realized that I saw animals differently than other people did. And I would notice the dog chained up. I would notice and care about the squashed animal by the car. I would, an example is that I was hiking in Ecuador, and there was this chained up monkey, and a bunch of people stopped and they took pictures because they thought it was funny. So I was standing in a semicircle of people taking the same photo, but I stopped and took a photo because I'm like, this is terrible. Maybe I can do something with this image. Like, I'm going to create proof, not just like a travel document, a picture from things I saw on my trip. I was like, this is terrible. What can I do with this image? And that's why images are so excitingly political. They are proof, they are useful. They're captures of what is and should never again be. And I started to think of my photography in that context. How can I use the camera to inform people and to get people to think differently? And so it did start with that image of a monkey chained up, and that was in '98. And that was one of the seeds that was sown towards turning my full focus to the hidden animals.
In hearing you discuss that just now, it made me think of, you are now part of, or have been part of, that tradition of photojournalism, of creating change with Jacob Riis, How the Other Half Lives. Charles Hine, Lewis Hine, Lewis Hine, and his documentation of like child labor at the turn of the century. So, I mean, it's fantastic that the work is able to affect those changes.
Very happy that the photography world is accepting this definition we created of animal photojournalism. I felt it was a really bold move, and I thought, oh, like I might get some major pushback. Who am I to decide that a whole new genre of photography is needed? But on the contrary, it's been welcomed, and it's why I'm being invited to jury World Press Photo and all this stuff and lots of interviews, because people are like, huh, animal photojournalism, this makes sense. One of the lead photo editors at National Geographic sent me a private message saying, Joe, I've worked really hard to move things away from wildlife photography to conservation photography. That took a long time, and I'm really proud of my efforts, but I think what you're doing is the next frontier, and all animals deserve, a place in National Geographic and in the public conscience. So she said, I'll help you any way I can, because we all need to be fighting for the fish and the sheep and the pigs and the horses. And I just, that was fantastic to hear.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions?
I have I guess it's kind of a fraught question. First, I'd like to thank Sarah Cannon, who is our exhibition coordinator and has set up this meeting and has helped through the whole thing. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
But the question is how you feel about pets as opposed to like farm animals, as opposed to wild animals, like how, in the animal husbandry and you personally, how do you cover, how do you present, and how do you feel about those differences?
Yeah, I'm very passionate about companion animals and about their lives and how we raise them and how we treat them. I don't photograph them as much because there's a lot of coverage of the issues with breeding, the number of animals dying in shelters, like perfectly loving and beautiful animals who are being euthanized by the millions every year, who could be adopted, when we prefer to, buy an animal that's been bred and prefer to have a puppy and all this. So I'm very vocal about that. And sharing our lives with animals is quite a spectacular thing. We can have incredibly deep relationships with other animals. And the fact is that, animals who are in need of our care are not going away anytime soon. And so I do encourage people to, to adopt animals. I have adopted hundreds of animals, and hundreds because of the number of birds I've adopted. I had 12 birds up in my office and like basically flying around the house at one point. They were all kept in these tiny cages, and here they, I wish they didn't have to be captive, but at least they had a house to fly around in. And anyway, there's room. Someone wrote, I have 13 rescued cats. Amazing. What fun. But yeah, I think that we should all really be discussing moving away from breeding animals when there are so many animals who need homes. Even if we want that breed, I think that it's, we want that breed and we know that breed and the breed has always been in our family. And I understand the feelings around that and those arguments, but nevertheless, what about all the others? And that's also what's exciting about doing this work, is that I get to talk about thinking outside of our wants, whether the want is to like have a specific breed, or the want is steak, or the want is a fur coat. There are so many other people, individuals involved. And that's what gets me really excited. I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure it does.
Let's see.
Does anyone have a question for Jayanti, who is the co-exhibitor?
Do you two have any questions for each other since you're here right now?
we've had a lot of conversations that have been fantastic and informative, and I'll be speaking at Jayanti's college soon, in fact, with her students. Looking forward to answering all of their questions and seeing what they think about animal photojournalism.
Great.
Has anyone, oh, I was just going to ask, you might have touched on it with the hens, but that idea of the change of heart, has there been any other people or organizations that kind of came around, or aside from like the law side, but like that conscience, that moral compass side?
Give me an example, because I might be.
Well, like you mentioned the hens. I was just wondering if there were any other stories like that where the man said here he surrendered them, but like I was just curious if there were any other examples of that shift.
Yeah, we're making a film right now about transformation, which is a popular play on words these days with a lot of animal organizations and vegan organizations. There are more and more people who are getting out of farming. And the film that we're putting out this year is about a transformation. And not only a woman farmer who has transformed her own farm away from animal agriculture to plant agriculture, but she's helped over 80 farms do it as well. And she's in Switzerland. And so we've sent 2 photographers to go and photograph a day in the life of her and the other people she's working with who, can maintain, their it's not a career when you're a farmer, but like their income and what they do. They don't have to sell their property. They can continue to farm, but just in a different way and in a more sustainable way and in a kinder way. So yeah, we're seeing stories like that. It's also really exciting when I get to see the direct effects of my work on policy change or the closure of farms. In Southeast Asia, I was undercover as a monkey buyer, and we went to 3 farms. We documented extensively the conditions the animals were living in. We gave that work to an NGO that presented it at the CITES convention the following year in Geneva. And as a result of that investigative work, 2 of the 3 farms closed down. And those are my favorite kind of work relationships with NGOs and with policymakers. They don't happen often, but all the work that we're putting into the world generally has an effect day to day because people are learning from it, and our work is used in campaigns globally and so on. We know it's working because we have people write to us every single day saying how they've changed their minds about animals or how they consume animals. So it's very rewarding, but there's still a lot of work to be done, which is why I'm grateful again that you're hosting our work and getting people to think differently about our relationships with the others. And what a great title to the exhibit. Like when you thought of that, Selena, right? That was yours. The company we keep. The word keep, the word company, all of it. Fantastic.
Well, yeah, thanks for mentioning that. But I mean, that came to, again, that synergy of looking at your work and Jayanti's together and just, yeah, that idea of, there's that connotation of being kept and all of that loaded, meanings behind it. But then also that, we keep them, but it's in this loving way too, and just how it can get so murky. It's
yeah. It's a great conversation starter.
Yeah,
that title.
it is. I mean, yeah, I mean, even going back to like Robin's question on the domestic level, as a pet owner, I think sometimes too, we have to think about, well, how are we treating the pet, or we see others treat their pets in certain ways that we may not agree with. And I mean, it's down to that level of us in our homes, even of how we treat or pests, even, right? Like possums, raccoons. I mean, they all have feelings too. So
yeah, they all want to do their own thing.
They sure do. Well, I mean, I think you've answered. I had some other questions written down, but you did a wonderful job and answered them. But if there's anything else last minute, I know we're right up on 4 o'clock. I noticed the chat. Oh, that was Deborah's. Yeah. And also too, I mean, I know with Jayanti's work, I'm thinking about when people rescue these animals, the intent is always there to help, but then sometimes it grows beyond their control. And I don't know if you had anything to say about that, Jayanti, just like that a drama teacher told me this once, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, that people want to help the animals and rescue them, take them off the streets, but then sometimes it ends up becoming a worse situation. Um,
Yeah.
was that the case with the woman from, I feel like the older woman that rescued like the cats and dogs? Like
No,
her
I mean,
heart was there, but it was kind of overwhelming. And
yeah, me being elderly, and she has a lot of help though with volunteers, which is great. And just the fact that she gave up her entire life and her home to these animals is just remarkable. And but yeah, I think she carries a huge kind of burden on her back, that she has to care for all these animals that they keep coming in, and she doesn't adopt them out. She just keeps them for the rest of their lives. So it's got to weigh heavily on her, and that's kind of what I showed in the photos and one of the photos of her. But yeah, it does get out of control in a lot of cases, and that's the complicated part, because these people mean well, and she certainly doesn't is doing really well with, I think, she's more on the positive side of the coin, like it's yeah. Who's really interesting that should talk are my parents. They're here.
Yeah. Hello. Thanks for coming.
My parents have always been a part of my work and a part of the process, and they have a lot to say. I don't know if they want to say anything. No.
Thanks for coming.
in what way? Just like support, or?
Yeah, but just like kind of, I don't know, just fleshing out ideas and brainstorming, and just, yeah, support, of course, and just helping me with a lot of things with my message and my concepts and the writing, and just they're really good editors. So I guess I'm just giving props to my parents for being here and being part of this whole process my whole life. It's been really great.
Oh, how
That's
wonderful
a very
that you,
important support team to have, for sure.
Yeah.
yeah, and like, critically minded people who want to engage and discuss. That's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, Robin, before I turn it over, I want to say thank you again to everyone joining today, and to the artists, Jayanti and Joanne. And Robin, if there's anything you want to share, maybe with upcoming shows or things to keep on our radar.
Yes, thank you so much, Joanne, Gianti, and Selena, and Sarah. We're coming down to our last week and a half of being able to see the Paul Caponegro exhibition that's up now, a really beautiful landscape. And it's going to be replaced by Suzanne Camp Crosby, who was a local photographer and professor for generations of photographers here in the Tampa Bay area. And it's going to be a retrospective of her work and really a celebration of her life and arts. So that opens June the 3rd. Yeah, a lot of exciting things. Is it closed now, Sarah, the International Photo Competition?
Yes, the submissions are now closed, but
Okay. So
that's coming.
those are closed, but stay tuned, because the winners will be announced, and an exhibition. We do an exhibition of the winners of that competition in our community gallery. So stay tuned for that too. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I think it was really interesting, and just makes you kind of walk through the world a little differently and see things a little differently when you are reminded of how we are all animals walking through the world. So thank you.
Well said. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Until next time.
Bye. Bye.
See you soon,
Bye,
Auntie.
thank you.
Bye, Joanne.